right, welcome to another episode of A Single Window. So today we're going to address a question that was a comment on one of my videos, and it is the only comment on my videos thus far. I have another channel, it's got a few comments and a few things, a lot more activity, but this one's been pretty quiet so far. So the question is, why love usually arrives in our lives unbidden, according to the gentleman in the center. So first of all, I could say that, give away a little bit. First of all, I can say that the guy in the center here, why I chose him to be the first one to represent the other side, which is the circular side. So this statement is a very clear one that I would say, let's take the extreme here. This guy right here would never say. So he would kind of, you hate to generalize and you hate to say that and make assumptions for anybody's belief system, but based on what he said, there's not much room for this in what he said. And I think he answered the question probably as well as anyone. But there's not much room for this kind of idea of love. And he was probably talking about a different kind of love or these two were talking about two different kinds of love. But he was saying one that was like really influential and important in your life. And I'm not sure if anybody's had an experience where this is kind of something that people talk about generally. And maybe people think it's real, maybe people think it's kind of just conjecture. But the reason I'll explain why it's possible is because of a concept related to this. I'm tempted to go a little bit too far into this right now. Keep in mind that this side was the one that is supposed to be intuitive. So let's write this right now. Intuitive, and was supposed to be able to see into the future. So we have lots of examples now. We have the Matrix girl being able to see in the future, and then the example of the oracles in ancient Greece, and people with even just intuition, right? You could say that you obviously have this possibility, at least, that you have some idea of what is to come in these intuitions, especially when you hear stories of people that had a premonition of something happening and that ended up happening. So I'm just going to leave that there for now, but that's important, and that'll explain why this could be true for people that believe in this side more than this side, but not necessarily exclusively. So let's go into this. I don't know if you guys remember, but or if you noticed this when I was speaking about it, but I didn't talk about these two elements here when I talked about this situation before. So these two brothers that were kind of representing kind of the archetypes for sort of square mentality and then sort of the circular mentality, they were going different directions, kind of. And Ivan kind of had a downfall at the end of the story and kind of went on a slippery slope, you could say. And he was going this way most of the novel, though. And Dmitri, towards the end at least, you could say, and at this moment that we're going to reference here, started going this way. And just bear with me here. This is going to come back to what we're talking about. So I want to give a very, very basic explanation of these concepts here. So Ivan, when he was talking to Alyosha, they were having dinner or they were having drinks at somewhere in the town. And he gave this idea of his poem, which was called The Grand Inquisitor. And the poem took place during the Spanish Inquisition, so one of the darkest times for Christianity. And in his poem, Jesus came, and during the Inquisition, where all these terrible things are happening, Jesus just walked through the town center. And everybody knew who he was instantly. And there was no doubting it. And people just kind of stand in admiration of him as he walked through. And as he was walking through, he got to a certain point, and he was seen by the Grand Inquisitor, and the Grand Inquisitor arrested him, put him in jail. Later that night, the Grand Inquisitor went to go visit him, and what he basically told Jesus was that, I know who you are, and there was no doubt in his mind, really, who it was. But basically, he told them, we don't need you. What the church gives the people, is what he was saying, is structure, protection, uh, an organization that makes them feel safe, especially, obviously, the Christians more than the people that were outside of Christianity. And people just wanted to have food and bread, and they didn't want to be saved anymore, basically. And he just told them to go away. He says, we don't need you. We've got this, we've got what we want. That's all we want. That's all the people in the world want nowadays, is just to survive and just to have a structure that they feel like they can trust. And this kind of gets back to this idea that the book was talking about a few times of, and keep in mind, this is Russia during a time where Christianity for the first time has really been questioned in a very long time. And the argument that some of the people had against Ivan and his ideas from the West, which were very science-based and very Enlightenment-based and European ideas, people were saying, well, without God, what is there to keep people? Everything is free game then. And I'm paraphrasing what they said, but there's nothing to hold you to account. Everything is, I can't remember the exact word, I really wish I could, but especially there was a guy named Smernikov, and Smernikov talked about, well, all things are okay to do then, and he kind of uses this justification for some of the bad things that Smernikov did. And but Ivan's argument before the end of the novel anyway was that people just want to eat, they want to be safe, they want to be able to have this structure to work within in the world, and kind of this basis of the world being the only thing. And this was a new idea at the time. Dmitri, on the other hand, we talked about having kind of a wild, crazy life. Like, he was sort of that fun, wild guy that we all kind of have somebody that we can maybe relate to that idea. And Dmitri had this moment when he got arrested, and I told you before that he was arrested for the death of his father at first, and he had this dream that night, and the same kind of situation came up where we have people that are trying to deal with being hungry. Dmitri in his dream went up and he saw this child that was starving, and he said, why is the babe hungry? And he never really got an answer, but he was just on asking, why is the babe hungry? And the kind of idea that came out of that is that this is all part of God's will, and this is all part of what Alyosha was aiming towards, and what Alyosha was kind of evidence of in the novel, is that God works in these ways, and Alyosha always had these positive effects on either of his brothers through the entire novel. But this is bad things are happening in the world. Either way, maybe the world can be made better by structure and organization and programs, but maybe there's a reason for all this happening, and maybe there is something positive coming out of it. So keep in mind what I was talking about people being able to see in the future too, and Alyosha's ability to kind of always know what to say and what to do. So the reason for this is we're going to talk about these two concepts here. So when things are going together, and why people can see into the future here, is because these are centrifugal. So centripetal, centrifugal are two opposite things. So a centrifuge is something that throws things outwardly. So that's this one. And centripetal is bringing things together. And the reason why these people can see into the future, and boy, I shouldn't have went this far with this, but this is something I believe, so you might as well know it now. Centripetal, there's only one route in the centripetal. So remember I was showing you that picture before, there's only one line in the center. This line, there's only one. So the only way you can know the future is if it's fate, if it's the only way it's going to be. This one, like the moth we were talking about, there's a million different directions, and it's all can go a million different ways, so there's no way you can tell the future about it. But this one, there's only one way, and once you're on that path, everything's going to work together centripetally, so everything's going to kind of spin into this oneness. So maybe you've heard before people talk about lumpers and splitters. So these are kind of generally, and this is very generally, keep in mind, these are the splitters. Split people, and these are the lumpers. So they're trying to make everything be one in this side, and they're trying to split everything up and look at it smaller and smaller elements. I think one of the analogies I used at the very beginning was cutting up a frog, and you're splitting it, you understand it better, but you're losing the holism of the frog at the moment you do that. So the reason why love can come to your life unbidden is you're on this path, and that person that comes into your life is going to contribute to being a better version of yourself when you're on this path. And they're not the exclusive thing you're seeking out, but you're just going. And we have this saying in Western society, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And it's the same kind of concept. If you're on this path, everything is going to materialize to your benefit to figure it out. And a lot of the different cultures throughout history always talked about fate, and we don't believe in fate anymore, but a lot of them did, and I think that's why that they were going this way. And nowadays we're the opposite of this. We're centrifugal. We're seeing all these different elements around us, and there's a million different routes that seem to be apparent. But if you know anything about dimensionality, something that seems like another route can loop back into the same situation. So you have one of the examples they give is like a piece of paper that you give a spin to, and you can have the sort of, I know I can't really draw a spin here, but you can have the perception of going all the way around this, and then you go underneath, and then you come back, you're going all this direction around, and then you come back on the outside again. And if you're looking straight down and there's enough ahead of you, you look like you were going in a straight line the whole time, but really you're just going in a circle. So something you could say is that all these seem to be going in a circle. These ones are going one route. It's that line that goes through everything. And I'll just throw these all together because I think that's when all these are together, that's supposed to be that representation of being completely aligned and being completely on your path. So the other side is like, and I took this one because you're going to look like an innocent person. Yes, you may be one innocent person, but you're just one person. And if we're taking the physicist perspective, you have a whole bunch of chemicals that are working in your brain that could be sending you a million different directions. It's just chaos. But we're only one little person among 8 billion on this planet. And of those 8 billion, we're only one planet within a solar system that's far bigger than our planet is. Obviously, this is not the scale. This is all way more stretched out. We're only one solar system within a universe of galaxies and billions of light years that go farther and further and further. So this is obviously this idea, the centripetalism. Centripetal, I don't think that's a word. The centripetal notion of being spread out and being making us feel like we're this smaller thing that doesn't really, not as influential. And you can go as small into the small, if you go all the way to like say Planck's length and go to things like such as string theory, you can go as small as that too. And that's almost makes you feel as isolated as well, because I mean there's so many things that are working that you can't have any influence on. So it's almost more daunting to think of how small things are operating and how much we may or may not have a control of it. Whereas the other side, I mean, everything is working towards one, and everybody's trying to make everything be this one thing. Keep in mind that all of motion in the world is the reaction of opposites. So you have the reactions, say, look at this picture here. We have the actions of gravity pulling the water towards the ocean, which is the biggest parts of the biggest bodies of water. And this process can be repeated by the opposite processes, not the opposite necessarily processes, but processes that are kind of working against those processes of bringing the water onto the land again, having it rain down and then flow back out. So there's just like just like you're stringing back a bow. These are, so you obviously have contrasting forces here with a string, and then when you pull this back, you're going to have another contrasting force. And this creates motion. But the point of what these guys are saying, and then it's interesting too, the holistic, so being one whole. So think of this as not really the oh, homophone, right? Uh, this maybe is related to the same thing, this holism, the whole being one whole. So in this belief system, all that really needs to happen here, if you want to clear this water that looks so dirty, the best thing you can do is just let it sit. Is just remove the opposing forces. Removing the opposing forces is to bring everything together. So things won't be being turned up and made chaotic if those two opposites aren't creating these things. It's kind of like weather being these sort of high pressure and low pressure systems that are working in contrast to each other because they're not unified. And there's many levels of this, as you can kind of tell. I'm biting off more than I can chew again, but I'm just giving you the basis of it, and hopefully this will be a window into kind of talking about these things more if you guys have some questions. So an example of this, and this is something that Carl Jung talked about too in some of his novels, is this sort of idea of an intermarriage. So when Jung was dying, he talked about going to this beautiful wedding in his well, you could say his imagination, who knows exactly what was going on, but of these two sides, the male and the female being joined in himself. So if we think of one of these being male and masculine and feminine, it could be just these ideas coming together once the conditions for creating opposition are taken away. So you lose your body, you think you're dying, and then these two just kind of naturally, that water becomes clear by just it just naturally setting out once the opposing forces are missing. So we showed this picture before, and I know you can't really see it here, but this picture is the same as this. And some of the images of this look a lot like when these two come together. So the feminine is usually represented as the moon, so we have that element here, and often the sun. And here's another one of those things with the homophones is sun, sun, so sun, male, and then we have sun. This being this is supposed to be like a shape representing the sun, this one, or representing gold. So all these elements coming together is the one that's supposed to be taking you back up, and this is that central route through this idea. So you can kind of see all this stuff coming together. I'll end here. So this lady having this guy in her life, or this guy having this lady in his life, could be something bringing, trying to think of all this stuff as materially. So we're one of the very, one of the only cultures that so one-sidedly pick this materialism sort of idea. If you think of sort of like Jung talked about his marriage, his intermarriage of the two sides of himself coming together. If you're on that path going this way, which is one path, this way, you're having experiences and people come into your life that help you become a better version of yourself, a more complete version of yourself. They're helping you grow. You're helping each other grow. And coming back to this unified one. So I've completely sold myself out to mysticism at this point, but it might as well come out. So this is where I'll leave it today, is with this concept. So good things come into your life unbidden because you're not really pursuing it, but there's this sort of centripetal motion, centripetal, that comes together, that brings these elements, and then you'll bring in positive people into your life once you're on this path. Whereas if you're on this path, maybe you bring people that further fracture yourself in the world. And don't think that I'm trying to make this side be a negative thing, and it is definitely not. They're just two different orientations, and often the circle side is going this way and the other side is going this way. But that doesn't mean that this one isn't important. I'm going to say that it is in some regards important, and we'll talk about that more often. And I think it's a really good thing the way things are now is that we can see a lot of these elements of this square methodology, that we can really talk about it very well. If we didn't have it come up, we wouldn't understand it all. So this is the best situation possible. But anyway, that's all I'll say this week. Hope you guys have a good day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.